Welcome to my tutorial for Micro Machines Military Battle Arena mode. And this tutorial is going to be specific for the Battle Arena mode. There's a lot of modes in this game. Seems like a great game. I have to try some of the other modes. There's also a harder battle mode called Battle Mode Pro or something like that. Pro Battle Arena, which is actually a harder version of this with different maps. They're all altered. It seems pretty cool. I have to try that shit out as well. This one took me around 5 hours and 35 minutes to beat. It's deceptively difficult for a mode that only takes about 10 minutes to complete if you do it right. Now, I did have one death, which was a really clean run for the most part. So I just left it unedited for this tutorial. Normally, I would edit out deaths for most of the tutorials. But I always post the raw playthroughs as well, which in this case, this is actually both. So for this, what you're going to do is drive around in circles until the timer runs out. For each round, you have to survive for 30 seconds, and then you have to kill the remaining enemies. So what I recommend doing for most of the stages, with some slight variations, is driving around in circles, basically, for 30 seconds while trying to survive. It throws the enemies off, so it's hard for them to actually get a beat on you and hit you. It makes you a lot harder to hit. If you stop moving at any point, the enemies can really combo you with bullets and knock you out of the arena. The goal here is to knock the enemies out of the arena and not get knocked out of the arena yourself. There is no health bars. It's all about just knocking enemies out. Now, this is the most narrow arena in the entire game, but it's not a hard level. I recommend just circling around in its very center area here, where you see me circling around. And then when the timer runs out, get ready to take out the spawns. There's only about 4 spawns where enemies can spawn from. 2 on the left side, I believe, and 2 on the right side, top and bottom. So you can actually spawn kill the guys pretty much if you do it right, if you need to. Now for this, you can manipulate the enemy AI by just driving around in circles. I recommend circling around as you see me doing so here. Now I tried just circling around just the lake, and that's a lot more dangerous. I found that I got shot out of the arena much more often by doing that. But if you circle around where you see me doing it here, this is very effective. Because the enemies are going to try to take the shortest path to get to you, which is often a diagonal, which means they're going to drive into the lake. You know, they're not too fucking smart. So you can really exploit them there. You may need to switch directions on rare occasion, but you want to avoid switching directions when possible, because that means that you have to be stationary for just a moment, and that's when you can get taken out easily. So you got to be careful with that. This is probably the hardest stage in the game, and you can see I already lost a life here. And this is the only stage where I lost a life in this run. So, and I found it to be one of the most difficult stages. So what you're going to want to do here, this is going to test your maneuvering skills. You're going to want to zigzag and keep driving around. You don't want to stop moving unless you really know what you're doing. But you want to mostly just drive around circles, circle around the butter knife and the apple. Sometimes you're going to crisscross, but you mostly just want to go circles around the apple and butter knife. And when the timer runs out, that's when you have to take out the remaining enemies, as with all the stages. So once the timer runs out, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can try to drive around the edges, and it'll make it so the enemies, they're not too good at driving around edges, so they may drive off the cliff, and then you won't have to kill them. Or you can do what I do most of the time. I do a combination of both, but I like to go behind the butter knife, which you saw me do very briefly, but I usually do it for a longer period of time. But you go behind the butter knife, and if the enemies shoot you into the butter knife, it slows down your movement backwards, so you don't get knocked out as easily. And you can brace yourself against that butter knife and take out the remaining enemies. Though some of the things that I'm describing, I did not execute in the tutorial because I did things a little bit differently and improvised more in this actual successful run. Now for this normally would test your sniping skills the way I play it. Normally what I do is I snipe out the spawns, and I would usually hit them and move them back off the screen, killing them pretty fast. But I got overwhelmed here, and I just had to survive by driving around and trying not to get knocked out of the arena. So this was not a clean completion, but I did survive. Normally I would use those things that say 3M, those barriers. I use the top one, and I brace myself against it so that when enemies shoot me, I can't move off screen because the barrier's in the way. So you can kind of plant your ass against that and use that as a kind of a stable area to shoot the enemies and snipe them out as they spawn. The problem with the helicopter stage is that when you get shot, it takes a very long time to recover. And same when you hit the enemy, so it's a dangerous stage. It's very easy to get taken out on that stage. So you have to be pretty accurate with your shots. It's more of a sniping test, unlike the other stages. So with this stage, I stay against the center mass the whole time and circle around. I stay as close to that center mass as I can, and then when the timer runs out, I'll take little cheap shots at the enemies and try to knock them off balance. You can see that the main theme here is driving around circles to a various degree. You know, it's a little bit different on each stage, but the idea is to survive for 30 seconds by driving around in circles usually. Now here I circle around this thing that says Ranger. I kind of go up on the top of it because that gives me some stability, so it's hard for the enemies to shoot me out of the arena because I'm kind of braced against it. And then I kind of shoot around it to take out the remaining enemies when possible. Always be patient if you're getting overwhelmed, do extra laps. It'll throw the enemies off and then come back around and take your shots again. And you shouldn't have too much trouble with this stage. It's one of the easier ones. This stage can be quite difficult, but it's not too bad with a decent strategy. You want to drive around in circles and stay close to this mid area. You see me circling around that middle bunker. Now that thing on the top looks like a bridge that you can drive on, but it's not. It's actually a barrier. But you can go in this little bunker, and it's kind of a safe area to where it's hard for the enemies to push you back. But it's also pretty damn crowded, especially now with all these vehicles still alive. So you want to drive around in circles and stay close to that. And then what I usually try to do is I hope that the enemies will get sloppy as I'm driving laps around circles, that some of the enemies will drive off, and just commit suicide basically by driving sloppy. And when I get a chance, I kind of stop around the corners and try to snipe out the ones that are vulnerable, that look like they're pretty easy to knock out. They're close to the edge. So just be patient with that and snipe out the enemies when you have good shots. Don't stay still for too long, and don't try to shoot enemies when you don't have good shots, because you'll easily get knocked out. It probably doesn't look that hard, from this footage, but like I said, it took me around 5 hours and 35 minutes, so it's quite deceptive. And of course, when you lose 3 lives, you have to restart the entire thing, and there's no continues or anything. Luckily, I only died once in this run. This is the hardest stage. What you want to do here is circle around and keep the enemies in the middle at all times if you can. I circle around the enemies. That's the point that I'm trying to circle around. I'm trying to keep all the enemies in the middle. Then when the timer runs out, I'm very patient. I continue circling, but now I'm occasionally taking single shots. And I usually won't do more than one focused shot on the enemy because I just want to fuck up their driving so that they kind of fuck each other up. I'm not necessarily trying to be the one that takes them out. I just want to fuck them up and get them out of rhythm. So I'm just, circling around them and taking a shot when I can, but I don't stay still for too long because you'll get comboed to death very quickly. Now, when there's only one, it's not too dangerous as long as you're in the middle. You'll have some time to adjust your driving if you get spun out. Now, anytime you get spun out in this game, when you go into a spin, you're always going to stop spinning at the direction you were facing before you started, getting spun. So whatever direction you were facing is the direction you're going to end up at when the spin stops. Very important to know that because, that's part of not driving off cliffs and shit, is knowing which way you're going to be facing when you come out of the spin. And it allows you to get out of those combos quickly. Now, sometimes you get comboed and you're pretty much fucked. The enemies will just barrage you with bullets. You get hit once and it'll just combo you to death. That's what makes the game, quite difficult at times. This area is really not that hard. I recommend staying in the mid areas and kind of going in between the paint cans. Because when you're between the paint cans, it's a lot harder for the bullets to knock you off the stage. They kind of stabilize you a bit so you don't get knocked up or down too much. Now, you can still get knocked back, though, so you got to be careful. But kind of staying in the middle is pretty safe. And then when the timer runs out, just try to snipe them out when you have clean shots. And that's pretty much it. I wasn't able to demonstrate everything perfectly in the tutorial because I ended up improvising a lot more since I got used to the game. So, this was really just my playthrough. It wasn't intended to be a tutorial initially. I wasn't trying to play to demonstrate. But I did actually change one of my controllers. It was an M30 controller. These are the 8-bit Do M30 Sega Genesis style controllers, kind of like a Saturn controller. And I changed to a 2.4 gigahertz model instead of the Bluetooth model, because I found some research that it has like a lot less input lag. So I tried it out. It seemed a lot more responsive, and I think that helped a lot. But as a result, some of my playthroughs, like Ninja Gaiden 3 on the NES and Double Dragon Advance on the Expert mode, where I did a 1-credit run, were probably a lot harder using that controller after seeing how much more responsive this one seems to be. But it should definitely be helpful moving forward. I'm also kind of transitioning to a joystick for a lot of games now. But when I do use a pad, it should be a little bit more of a responsive option, so it should help. You got to watch out for input lag on emulation as is. Some emulators are going to be laggier, especially Saturn. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.